On the top of Daf Chaf Beis Amid Aleph, Tani Debei Rabbi Chia. We're counting down from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down from the top of the unit. Shlishi Shebibno. So we're talking about the third generation from his son, which means his son's granddaughter. No. His son's great-granddaughter, right? Bas, no. Let me get it again. It's his great-granddaughter, which means the daughter of his son. Just one second. A great-granddaughter means, right, I think I got that right? The daughter of his son's daughter. B'sheba Bito, and the same idea, the daughter of his granddaughter through his daughter. So that's called Shlishi Shebibno V'sheba Bito V'sheba Ben Ishto. So we're talking about his great-granddaughter through his wife. V'sheba Bas Ishto, or his great-granddaughter through his wife through her daughter. Shnia. They are included in the Shnios Larayos. Revi Shebechomiv V'Shebechamoso Shnia. So this is his father-in-law's grandmother, or his mother-in-law's grandmother. So we got 4 generations in both these cases, right? We're talking about either your own great-granddaughter or your wife's great-granddaughter. No. I'm sorry, not your wife's great-granddaughter, but your wife's great-grandmother, who is Aim Chaviv, or Aim Chamosa. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Maishna lemala dekachashiv leishto, umaishna lemata delachashiv leishto. In the case of your wife, we went up 4 generations. In the case of your son going down, we only went 3 generations down, which is your great-granddaughter. Nechdas Bino, who is Bas Ben Bino, Lamatimenu Loka Chashiv Leishto. He doesn't calculate the wife of your son's grandson in this calculation. So he doesn't go as far as 4 generations. He's got Shlishi Shebibno V'Shebibito, but not Revi. So is there some difference between going up the ladder to the grandparents, etc., as opposed to going down the ladder to the grandchildren? So the Gemara answers that in the case of the grandmother of his father-in-law or his mother-in-law, which is 4 generations up, Lamala, the Isura Mikoach Ishto Ka'asi, these are prohibitions through his wife, Chashivla. He considers the wife as if she is one of the doros, and he adds an extra dar because it's through his wife. In the case of his own son or daughter, he's not going to calculate that extra generation. Okay, so let's say, for example, the granddaughter of his son, Lemata, is the Sura Lav Mikoch Ishtokasi Lo Kachashivla. So that Easter is for his own, through his own personal relationship. It's through his son, and it's his son's granddaughter. Has nothing to do with Ishto. So therefore, the wife of that grandson, let's say, or his son's grandson, is not going to be added as an extra dar. It's going to be considered shlishi libno, or libito. But when it starts with a kirva through his wife, then we have to add another generation. So the Gemara is not happy with this. For Ben Ishto, he marries a woman who has a son from a previous marriage, Ubas Ishto, or a daughter from his wife's previous marriage. And that's through his wife. And nevertheless, lo chashivle, he doesn't add another minyan hadoros through his wife. Now, if you're telling me that the reason why the Brisa doesn't calculate Ishto as one of the generations is because this Isser is not Mikoch Ishto, since in a case of Ben Ubas Ishto, the Erva, the Isser Shnios Larais, is through his wife. So why doesn't he calculate his wife as one of the generations? And the Gemara answers, "Aidi ditana shlosha doros lamata didei v'lo chashva." Since in the cases of going down to his son's granddaughter or his daughter's granddaughter, he doesn't mention another generation of Ishto. Like, for example, his son's grandson's wife, he's not going to add another generation. It's Tananami, Shlosha Dors Lamata Dida. When it comes to his wife's grandchildren, he's not going to calculate his wife as an additional generational choshva. So that's the symmetry of the Bryce. Now, with regard to the 8 arayos that were listed by Reb Chia in his Bryce, so that added to the other 8 to calculate 16, the Gemara now vacillates whether or not Yeshlem Hefsek. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana, Shnios de Be Rabbi Chia Yeshlem Hefsek or Ein Lem Hefsek. In other words, those that are enumerated by Reb Chia, that's what's prohibited. But we're not going to add another generation, lamata or lamala. So, for example, what about Ima v'em Ima? His mother and the mother of his mother, or his daughter and his daughter's granddaughter? Or should we say, Lem Hefsek, they're all prohibited for all generations. I had this issue in a different context in the laws of Yichud, because it's a het Yichud with a mother. What about a grandmother? What about a great-grandmother? What about a great-great-grandmother? Toshma Diyom Rav, Arba Noshim, Yesh Lem Hefsek. This was a Rav we had on the previous daf. That Rav said that there are 4 of the shnios sheyesh lem hefsek. No, it's their asuros and only their asuros, but not lamalo or lamata. Bisulo, only 4. Those were the 4 that mentioned by Rav. If for the shnios of Reb Chia, we should assume ein lem hefsek. No. Gemara rejects this. Dilma kikama Rav, when Rav says that there are only for noshim, which are asuros mishum shnios and yesh lem hefsek, that's legabe hahi masnisim, with regard to the women that are mentioned explicitly in that Mishnah. And of those, only 4 of them have a hefsek. But any other brisos, like for example, the shnios of Reb Chia, which are in a different brisa, and Reb Chia adds his additional 8, that has nothing to do with Rav's statement about yesh lem hefsek or ein lem hefsek. So therefore, the Gemara still retains this question as an outstanding question. Toshma, but let's be poshate this suffix from a brisa. The brisa says shlishi urevi. In other words, with regard to his son or his daughter, we will have a shlishi or a revi. What does that mean? In the case of his son or his daughter, we're going to go down shlishi, 3 generations. In the case of chamiv and chamosa, which are relatives to his wife, meaning his wife's father or his wife's mother, revi, we're going to have 4 generations. And it seems that only when the shlishi b'no bito or revi b'chamiv b'chamoso in, then there's an isur hein asuros al tfei, more than 3 or 4 generations low. So we see that in the shnios of Rabbi Chia there is a hefsek. The Gemara rejects it. Dilma, maybe what the Bryce has in mind is mishlishi v'elach umiravi v'elach. You add the word v'elach. It means 3 generations, etc. 4 generations, etc. Amalei Rava l'Rav Nachman. Okay, now we're going to talk about a case of a ger who underwent gerus, and he's considered like a katan shenoladon. He's allowed, according to Torah law, to marry any of his biological relatives after his gerus. The Chachamim prohibited it, again, assuming they'll be miskayer. The Chachamim prohibited in those krovos that are an erva doraisa. Had he not been a ger, we would have an erva doraisa. And the question is, what's the status on a drabanan level of a ger regarding shnios larayos? Amalei Rav Nachman chazi mar hai mirabanan the asi mimarov. I saw this chacham who came from Eretz Yisrael. The Amar, and he's declared, bo b'marov. They vacillated the Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. Gazru shnios begerim, o lo gazru shnios begerim. When the Rabbanan instituted an Isser Arayos on a ger for his biological relatives, they include shnios. Amalei hashta uma erva gufa ilav shelo yomru boy mikdusha chamru l'kedusha kalo gazru v'Rabbanan shnios boy. Why is it? What was the logical compelling reason why the Rabbanon said that a ger is not allowed to marry his relatives? And the answer is because we don't want people to declare when he was a guy, he was prohibited from his relatives. And that's included in Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which is the Sugya in Sanhedrin involved in Zion. And now he entered into Klal Yisrael and his Kedusha went down. Now he's allowed to marry all those women that he was previously enjoined from marrying. If not for this chashash of Yomru, Boyim, Kedusha, Chabur, Kedusha, Halo, Gazur, they never would have been exerted Rabbanan to prohibit them. So in the cases of arayos of shnios, right? Again, on a deraisa level, they're mutaros, legam, right? They're not, and yet, even in an erva gmura doraisa, in some cases, there would be a heter for a ger or a gioris because it wouldn't come under the violation of boy mikducha chamur l'kducha kala. let's say as a guy, they wouldn't be prohibited. And now you're going to tell me shnios are going to apply to a gera giores? I mean, the whole thing is all about kedusha kala, kedusha chamura. But that's as far as a kedusha chamura doraisa, but not shnios. Rav Nachman gerim hol the asul lidin, hol the asul yadan. In other words, once gerim came into our domain, so to speak, now they're Jews, is nema behu milsa. We're going to add another din regarding the Isur Kurva in the case of a ger. Achim min ha'em, two brothers that share the same mother, and now they were both misgayer, and they want to testify together. Lo ya'idu. We will not, l'chatchila at least, accept their testimony. The imheidu, but b'di'evet, if we accepted their testimony, edusam edus is found. That's the case of achim min ha'em. Two non-Jews that were born to the same mother, now they were both miskayer. Av halachin min ha'av. But if these two, we'll call them Christopher and Patrick, shared the same father but not the same mother, and then they were both miskayer, is then me'idim lechatchila. We could even allow these two brothers, who are biological brothers, now they're both gerim, to testify together. Why? Because their relationship, in a biological sense, as goyim, was through the father. Right, so there's no such thing in a guy of kurva mina'ah. Even two brothers, let's say Patrick and Christopher, who shared the same mother, they could testify one against the other. So the Gemara immediately asks, why is the din of Edus different? We were makdir two biological brothers to testify, if they were half brothers. And yet in Arayos, we prohibited them from marrying, let's say, Patrick cannot marry Christopher's wife. I'm talking after Gerus. So we see that we treat them as brothers. So why with regard to Erva do we treat them as brothers and not with regard to Edus? And the Gemara answers, Erva lakol mesura, Edus lebezdin mesura. And Gershon, this guy could cut in Chinola. He says the following, that in the case of Arayos, everybody knows that, just 1 second, I'm sorry. In the case of Erva lakol mesura, in other words, everybody knows that this Christopher is marrying a relative of his. Not everyone knows that because of the principle of ger kakot and chenola dami, that therefore he's allowed to marry this relative. So we have to be much more careful with our rayos. But Edus, nobody has to know who came into Bezdin to testify. I mean, and which Edim were accepted by the courts. That's a matter of a private domain of the courts. And therefore they can be making on two brothers and apply the principle of ger kikot and chenolad. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Chaf Beis. Misha yeshlo ach mikol makom zokek es eshes aviv liyivu. So if somebody dies without children and he leaves a brother, mikol makom, even if his brother is a mamzer, nevertheless, the wife of the deceased brother requires chalitza or yibum. The achiv hu l'chol davar. In other words, we're not limiting this principle to the case of yibum. We're going to apply it straight across the board. For all dinei Torah, whenever the Torah speaks about a brother, a mamzer is considered your brother. Right? What does he add over here? Just 1 second. Okay. Chutz mi yesh lo ach min hashivcha umin overes kochav. So if his father fathered a child by a relation with the shivcha knainis or from a non-Jewish woman, they're not considered brothers. Not for yibum or for any other din. Because in the case of a relationship between a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman, the Vlad goes after his mother, and it's a non-Jewish child. There's no yichus to the father in a case of a mixed marriage, where the father was Jewish and married a non-Jewish woman. So therefore, if there's no yichus through the father, then it's not considered his brother. The Mishnah continues. Misha Yeshlo Ben, a person died, he left his wife, Mikol Makom. His son is a mamzer. Poter Eshes Aviv Min HaYibum. In other words, since he left this world with Zerah, even though it was a mamzer, nevertheless, there's no yibum. I'm just trying to figure out what it means by Eshes Aviv. Just 1 second. Poter. I would have said Poter Ishto Min HaYibum. What's Poter Eshes Aviv? Just as I'm missing something. You know, Kid Ben. Do you have anything on that maybe in your commentary? Why does he say Poter Eshes Aviv? I'm taking Eshes Aviv. Wife. Oh, okay, fine. It's just I'm sorry. It's just another way of saying the same thing. I would have said Poter es Ishto, but you can't say Poter es Ishto because the subject here is the Ben. So the Ben is Poter Eshes Aviv. Furthermore, v'chayav al makosa. If the son hits his father and wounds him, that's called chabura, then he's chayav misa for him. Also, kilel es aviv, chayav al kilosa misa. Ubeno l'chol dov, he's considered like his son for all dinim. Chutz, mimishi yesh lo ben min hashivcha umin overes kochavim. As we said before, a son from a non-Jewish mother, or shall we say his non-Jewish wife, is not considered his son. He is considered as belonging to his mother. And that's nogea to yibum. There won't be any yibum. There won't be any Isser Haka or Klola. The Gemara says, Mikol Makom, when the Mishnah says he has a brother Mikol Makom, and nevertheless he has the status of a brother to generate a zika to his wife, the Yibum. What's the language Mikol Makom? Lasuye Mai. Omar Rabbi Yehuda Lasuye Mamzis. The Gemara asks Pshita, why did the Mishnah feel compelled to identify the Ach Mamzer as an Ach who is Nolad B'Kashrus? The Mishnah already told me Achivhu. Right? Let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that Misha Yeshlo Ach Mikol Makom. Right? It says Achivhu L'chol Davar. Once the Mishnah says Achivhu L'chol Davar, why was it necessary for the Mishnah to mention Mikol Makom? So Gemara says, Ma'od Tema, I would have said Leilif. We should learn Xeret Shava, Achva. The Parsha of Yevamot, it says Ki Yeshu Achim Yachdav. So we have the word Achim. And Achva, in the case of Bnei Yaakov, it says Shnei Yisara, Avadecha Achim Anachnu. So when are you considered an Ach? It's only Mibnei Yaakov. Malahala, and with regard to Bnei Yaakov Ksherim, so therefore the law of Yibum, we might think there's an exception to the rule. It wouldn't be enough for the Mishnah to say Achivu L'chol Davar, because we would assume that's L'chol Davar to the exclusion of Yibum. Is Ksherim V'lo Psulim. Afkan Ksherim V'lo Psulim Kamash Mala. And the Mishnah tells me that even an Achmamzer is Mezakek L'Yibum, Zokek L'Yibum. So Gemara asks, Ema Chinami, since you have this Gzeira Shava of Achva Mibnei Yaakov, maybe Enochinam, we should come to the conclusion that the mitzvah of Yibam Yeshu Achim Yaakov only applies when they're similar to the Achim Mibnei Yaakov and it's an Ach Kosher, but not in the case of an Ach Mamzer. And the Gemara says, Keva until the Inyan Yibum Miftar Potar, since if a man had a son who is a Mamzer and he died, is he poter as Eishes Aviv? Eishes Aviv is the same as saying his wife. And there's no Chi of Yibum. It's therefore, says the Gemara here on Chav Beis, Amid Beis, Mizkak Nami Zakik. The Ach, who's a Mamzer, now, as a Yavam, is Mechayev, the wife of his father, for Yibum, or Chalitza, meaning there is a Z. Now the Mishnah says, Achivu L'chol Davar.